All right, good evening. Let's get ready for our next flipped video, all on fractions. I know you've missed having one of these, and it's time to start them up again. Equivalent fractions, all right? You almost see the word equal in there, almost. Let's look at our VIC. What is an equivalent fraction? We've heard of it, but what exactly is that? And equivalent fractions are fractions which have the same value, even though they may look different. Here's an example. 1/2, 2/4, and 4/8 are all equivalent because they all show half. Here's 1/2, here's 2/4, and here are 4/8. As you can see, it's all colored in there. All right, and they are equivalent because they all show the same amount, or they have the same value. Also want to just I know you know this, but just for the sake of review, the numerator is the top number in a fraction. For example, that's the numerator. The denominator is the bottom number in a fraction. This would be the denominators. Now, equivalent fractions are usually very easy to make. They're not as hard as some people think. You can either multiply or you can divide both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. It has to be both. You can't do something to the top number and not to the bottom. You can't multiply the top by 2 and the bottom by 4. It has to be both the numerator and denominator by the same number. And the fraction, if you do that, the fraction will keep its original value. For example, if I have 1/2 and I multiply the top number by 2 and the bottom number by 2, I will get 2/4. If I multiply the top number by 2 and the bottom number by 2, I get 4/8. Notice it's the top and the bottom, and it's by the same number. This is why these fractions are really the same, and visually they would look like this. This would be 1/2. This would be 2/4, but you'll notice it's the same amount. I multiplied the top number by 2 and the bottom number by 2. And when I did it again, I got 4/8. This is why these are equivalent fractions, 4/8. All right. Now, you can multiply, you can also divide fractions to find equivalent fractions, but this is only if they can be divided. And it has to be both the top and the bottom number divided by the same number. You noticed in the panel before this, we multiplied the top and the bottom by the same number. This can only be done, if it can, because some of them can't be divided, by the same number. Here's an example. Let's say I have 12/15. And I think, what is a number that both 12 and 15 have in common that I could divide by? Well, 12 can be divided by 2 and 6, but 15 can be divided by, they both have 3 in common. All right, so if I divide 12 by 3, I get 4. When I divide 15 by 3, I get 5. 4/5 is an equivalent fraction to 12/15. Here's another one. 18 22. What do they have in common? 2. That's really it, 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 22 divided by 2 is 11. So 9/11 is an equivalent fraction to 18 22. Both of them were divided. Could I have multiplied them? Absolutely. I could have multiplied both of these by 2 and got 24/30. That would have worked. I could have multiplied this by 2 or 3 or 4. As long as I did it to the top number and the bottom, I could have. All right, now here's the thing about dividing fractions. The fractions have to be evenly divided. You can't have remainders. You can't have any remainders, so it must be evenly divided like these. Now, this is a big remember thing, like an asterisk or something by it. Very important. You can only multiply or divide to find equivalent fractions. You can never add or subtract to find equivalent fractions. You can only multiply or divide. And you can only divide if you can actually divide. If there is not a number that can be the same number divided in the top and the bottom, can't use it. Let's do some examples of what I'm talking about, because you may be saying, what do you mean if it can be divided? Okay. For example, what is an equivalent fraction for 2/3? All right, well, you could say I can multiply by 2, okay? So 2/3, if I do times 2, that would be 4. This would be 6. So 4/6 is an equivalent fraction to 2/3. Could I multiply by 3? Sure. 4 times 3, as long as I do it to the top and the bottom number, I can do it. 4 times 3 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. So 12/18 is equivalent to 4/6 and to 2/3. All of those are equivalent. Now, could I divide to find an equivalent fraction for 2/3? Let's see. I can divide 2 by 2. I can divide 3 by 3. Is that the same number? No, 2 and 3 are not the same number. So I can only multiply to get an equivalent fraction here. I cannot divide. All right? Here, what is an equivalent fraction for 3/9? I could multiply by 2. I could multiply by 3. I could multiply by 4. Let's see. 3/9 times 4. That would be 12. And 9 times 4 is 36. So 3/9 is equivalent to 12/36. Could I multiply by 2? Sure, I could have multiplied by 3, by 4, by 5. As long as I do it both to the top number and the bottom number, I can make it equivalent. Could I divide to do this? Let's see. What do these numbers have in common? Well, I can divide 3 by 3, and I can divide 9. Let me use a different mark for that. I can divide 9 by 3 and 9. What number do they have in common? 3. So could I divide? Absolutely. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. So an equivalent fraction to 3/9 is 1/3. Could I divide it by anything else? No. That's all they have in common is the 3. So 3/9, an equivalent fraction could be 1/3. Practice problems for tonight. Name 2 equivalent fractions for each. You can multiply to find it. You can divide to find it. You can just multiply. You can do a combination, whatever. You'll notice that some of these cannot be divided because they don't have a number in common that both the top and the bottom can be divided by. All right? But name 2 equivalent fractions for each and be prepared to discuss it tomorrow, okay? All right. Thank you.